What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today I will be reviewing the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. So the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong was a semi-recent Godzilla and Kong crossover with the Justice League and the DC Comics universe overall. It was actually this really fun crossover event that took the best elements of the MonsterVerse and brought it over into the DC Comics universe for this fun Elseworlds crossover story that brings together Godzilla and all of your favorite non-Toho kaiju and King Kong and put them into the broader DC universe, and mayhem ensues. So my non-spoiler thoughts on the comic overall is that it's actually pretty solid. I was a little skeptical going in because I'm not the biggest fan of crossover comic books. I find that sometimes they really work and sometimes they really don't. In this case, I found that it really worked. It took the best elements of the DC universe and brought them together with some of the best elements of the MonsterVerse. And one thing that I really liked was that it takes its time to establish the status quo of this DC universe and their characters before introducing the monsters and the mayhem and going crazy. I don't think it does as good of a job introducing the MonsterVerse as much, but I think it expects you're more familiar with the MonsterVerse than the DC universe, and in my case, I definitely was. One thing that you run into with crossovers is that certain characters have to be powered up, and certain characters have to be powered down in order for the crossover to work, and that does happen a little bit here, but I never found it to be overly distracting or to get into the way of things too much. And overall, I just really found it to be a creative use of all the different IPs at play. The DC universe has some really fun stuff going on, and same with the MonsterVerse. They do some really awesome stuff with Godzilla and Kong in this comic that I think is really iconic. My overall non-spoiler thoughts are that the crossover really works, and I really do recommend it to comic book fans. If you're a Godzilla fan and if you're a DC fan, I think it'll work for you, and if you're a fan of one or the other, I think it'll still work for you. I have a feeling that it'll be fun regardless of what fandom you're in, and if you're in both fandoms, then I think it's awesome. So I really recommend it for those reasons. I've actually reviewed the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong on the channel before in the form of YouTube shorts, which you may have already seen, and in this video, I'll be stitching together all of those if you haven't, and if you have, they'll be stitched together in an extended form, so they're longer than the original YouTube short versions, but that's what will be happening here. Now please enjoy my spoiler reviews as we go through issue by issue and review the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. Now that the entire Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong run is over, I figured it's time to read and review this series. And no better way to do that than issue by issue. I finally checked out issue 1 of Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. A lot of these crossover comics I find are very forced or very clunky. They don't often work in a very natural way, but issue 1 took the entire issue to just set up the conflict, establishing you in a very relatable Justice League story. I'm not the biggest DC guy and I'm not the biggest Justice League guy, that's for sure, but I really appreciated this comic's effort in rooting you in the core friendship of the Justice League, establishing their personalities, and setting up a personal conflict with Superman getting ready to propose to Lois, only for the Legion of Doom to come spoil the whole thing. I also think the way the Legion gets transported to the MonsterVerse seemingly mid-Mass Awakening using a mother box was a pretty creative way to do that, and I like that the Toyman uses the Wishing Stone to bring all the Titans back over rather than using a boom tube and rounding up all the Titans and doing it that way. Cool to see a Kong cameo, and I like the Godzilla setup with Godzilla showing up in Metropolis at the end there. That's going to be exciting to see in the next issue. We're back for another issue of the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. Issue 2 has a bunch going on, with the main selling point being the epic battle between Godzilla and Superman, which is really awesome. Now, I'm not the biggest DC guy, but I do know Superman could typically probably just fly a hole straight through Godzilla's head and kill him immediately. I know many Godzilla fans will hate to hear that, but that's definitely what would happen. But I like that Superman is such a good-hearted, kind-hearted person that he's trying his best to reason with Godzilla and to just get Godzilla away from the area rather than kill him. So in a way, he's kind of holding back. Godzilla, on the other hand, is absolutely not. Smacking Superman around and really just getting to let loose, it's pretty cool. Why the MonsterVerse Godzilla's going wild is probably just because this isn't his Earth, so keeping balance isn't his mission anymore, but I'm sure that'll be explored later. Scylla also shows up in Central City, and Behemoth shows up in Themyscira, so I'm sure that'll be in the next issue. And then Green Arrow discovers and starts to explore Skull Island, although there isn't a Kong cameo in this one. The other selling point of this issue was the awesome fight between the Gotham heroes and Camazotz, who is awesome. Love to see Camazotz back. Camazotz is really cool in this comic, keeping in the strengths and weaknesses weaknesses of the character from his previous comic appearance. While they do change the Sonic Scream ability, it was cool to see it return, and it was also cool to see the way they use Black Canary to weaponize that against him and take him down. That was awesome. And then it ends with Superman seemingly getting absolutely annihilated by Godzilla. It ends with Superman and Shazam fighting Godzilla, with Superman seemingly getting killed by Godzilla with the atomic breath, something that I don't think would happen, but you know, crossovers gotta crossover. Either way, I'm excited for the next one. So I just checked out issue 3 of the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. Now this one's a little busier than the other issues, so it's not my favorite, but there was still a lot of cool stuff within it. So it starts out with Scylla attacking the Iron Heights prison, which was pretty awesome, and I love that on top of the kaiju attack, all of the supervillains still take the time to beat up on the Flash a little bit. My favorite part of the issue was actually the Atom Smasher showing up to fight Godzilla very briefly. I just thought it was so cool, very entertaining, and great artwork. And I love the way they continue to use Shazam's lightning abilities to strike Godzilla, being the main thing that damages him. I also loved the small Shazam Supergirl team-up moment. That was great. It was wonderful to see Behemoth return, but just like in the movies, Behemoth doesn't really have much to do, barely interacting with Wonder Woman and I believe Wonder Girl there, before being called away by Mechagodzilla's eye. It was also great to see King Kong return, but I'm not sure what a Warbat was doing in Skull Island. They haven't been there before. But it was still awesome, and I liked the way that Kong and Supergirl had this kind of beef with each other. Lex has Mechagodzilla's eye, which means I don't know where in the MonsterVerse timeline these characters are being pulled from, because that wasn't built until well after the Mass Awakening. But I'm very curious to see where this goes in the next one, and I'm very excited for that. It's time for the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong issue 4. This is another packed one. I kind of feel like they're doing a little too much with the villains, because it gets a little over convoluted with just how many villains there are doing not really anything. But this one had a lot of really great, exciting moments in it that I was all for. I love how distraught Batman was over the death of Superman. I'm not a big Batman guy, so I'm not used to seeing him that vulnerable, and I really liked it. I also love the weird dynamic between Supergirl and King Kong, and I love the way Kong takes on the League of Assassins. That's so cool. I also love to see Lois's investigative journalism come to the forefront and to see her help solve the mystery. On the other hand, I don't know how Lex was able to get all that information on the MonsterVerse and Godzilla and the Titans of that universe, or the blueprints to finish the Mechagodzilla, so that was a little weird. And then what an amazing showdown at the end, with Tiamat showing up and attacking Atlantis, Aquaman making an appearance, and then Godzilla showing up to do what he does best and create balance by taking on Tiamat, and now the Kraken. What an amazing cliffhanger for the next issue. I love that the DC universe is integrating its own kaiju into this storyline as well. I cannot wait to see that in the next one. We're back with issue 5 of the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. Again, love to see how helpful Lois is being, and that she's teamed with Lex's partner Mercy, but it's things like that that make me feel really out of my depth, which is fine, because this is a crossover, and I like that it's the DC universe, as probably is right now. Even if I'm not totally up to date, I'm sure that's how DC fans feel when things like Camazotz and Tiamat show up. I loved the battle between Tiamat, the Kraken, and Godzilla. That was so awesome. I love that Godzilla and the Kraken really go at it for quite a while, and it seems like Godzilla completely kills the Kraken. Rest in peace. And I like that they're being lured around by those little Mechagodzilla signals that Lex has created. That's a very MonsterVerse thing to have happen. Not sure how he got all that Monarch data and was able to get up to date on the Titans in the first place, but whatever. We'll forgive. I don't know much about the DC universe, so I'm sure it makes sense some way. This one was another very busy one, but I thought they managed it a little better. Gorilla using Supergirl to fight Kong kind of came out of nowhere, but the rest of it was all pretty good, and I'm excited to see where everything's going with Batman building his own mech and the League of Assassins trying to resurrect this Skullcrawler. And even though Mechagodzilla was fully created in this one, which is a pretty awesome setup for the future, on the whole, it was the battle between Godzilla and the Kraken that really sold this one for me. And now that Godzilla's been captured, I can't wait to see them have to unleash him back on Mechagodzilla later. That'll be cool. Go keep nature's balance, buddy. We're counting on you. That was so amazing. Oh my god. It's time for issue 6 of the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. This is the kind of over-the-top crazy mayhem I expect in these crossover comics. This was insane, man. There's a lot happening in this one, but it's finally all crossing over into one story. Pretty awesome. There's a lot of crazy stuff. I can't believe Grodd murders Guy and winds up being one of the most powerful villains of this entire thing. Like, Grodd does more damage than Lex does with Mechagodzilla. Speaking of, it's awesome to start the issue with Lex Luthor and Mechagodzilla being the new king of the monsters, this false alpha that's leading the Titans into war against the Justice League. And I love that the Justice League comes prepared with a bunch of mechs of their own. The Bat Mech, the giant Green Lantern Robo, and then the Bat Jets can just turn into little mechs of their own. There's so much craziness, I really love it. The action was over the top and awesome. It was awesome to see King Kong show up and kick some ass, even if he was working for the wrong guys. King Kong and Mechagodzilla teaming up, that's nuts. And then what a fantastic cliffhanger with the League of Assassins unleashing this enormous, crazy hybrid Skullcrawler thing that we've never seen before, and then a series of Skull Devils. That's gonna be pretty awesome. I wish we got to spend a little bit more time on Mechagodzilla being the main antagonist, but I'm excited to see that. And then the fantastic little stinger at the end was Superman probably going to free Godzilla so that the two of them can team up. That's gonna be cool. Don't know how he revived himself, but I'm sure they'll explain in the next one. It's just a shame this is such a short crossover because I would love to have more of this. Another amazing issue comes to an end here, as does the full story, unfortunately so soon. I was having so much fun with it. I love the giant Titan war happening in Metropolis so much. It is so awesome. So many cool Titans, combo moves, mechs, and superpowers on display. It was so awesome. I still have no idea what was up that giant skull crawler. That was weird. But I love Kong getting a Green Lantern ring and powering up so he could use his axe. That is incredible. And it's very fitting for a character whose entire thing is just his strong will for him to wind up with the Green Lantern ring. I thought that was great. I loved all the mayhem. I loved Beast Boy going Kong. I loved Godzilla showing up and joining the fight. Epic to see Godzilla, King Kong, and Superman all team up to take down an enormous skull crawler. Also Godzilla's first skull crawler. Everything kind of wraps up a little too nicely and neatly, a little too quickly, but that'll happen when you have this little time to tell your story. But I love that they brought it to a beautiful end with the through line of Superman and Lois getting married. That was great. A fantastic storyline, and I'm so sad to see it go. This crossover was super fun, and I really look back at it with fond memories. I loved reading it when it came out. It was just so fun and creative. The middle issues were a little bloated with too much going on. It was really trying to juggle too many different storylines, and for me, really the villain's storyline was what was bogging things down. Whenever we were cutting away to too many of the villains, I just felt like they didn't add enough to the story always, and I think you could have trimmed a little bit of that fat to develop some other things within the storyline. But overall, I do think it generally works very well. It also led to some crazy things like Kong becoming a Green Lantern, which I think is incredibly iconic, and that whole final battle overall, which was awesome. But for me, the thing that really comes to mind when I think of this comic, other than the Kong Lantern, is the Godzilla versus the Kraken fight. I love seeing the creative use of the IPs like that, utilizing the DC Universe's own Kaiju Titan character and putting him up against Godzilla. It was a lot of fun. And for Godzilla fans alone, I feel like that fight was worth the read. For Kong fans, I think they do Kong mostly justice, and so I'd recommend it again to Kong fans as well. Overall, I thought the story was pretty solid, with the human story, the superhero story, being really entertaining. The villain story was a little muddy, but the Kaiju storyline was awesome, so it overall worked very well. The pacing was a little overly intensely fast in the middle there, but I do think they did a good job balancing enough character moments with broader action set pieces, and I really liked it for that reason as well. Another thing I want to shout out is the artwork, which I think was really hitting. All the DC art looked wonderful, that was never in question, and I think Godzilla overall looks really awesome with some really menacing frames. Kong is the one that I don't think they do as good of a job with. A lot of the time he looks very generic. It's kind of hard to tell that he's King Kong from the MonsterVerse, but overall he looks pretty good. And then Mechagodzilla I thought looked great. The other Titans I thought looked great. The only one that I think looks a little weird was Tiamat. I don't think looks totally like Tiamat. But other than that, I thought they did a really good job with all of them. And another thing that I really loved about this was the creative use of some of those smaller Titans like Kamazats, who I thought had one of the best set pieces in the whole comic. And I love the Scylla attack on the prison. That was wonderful stuff. So I just thought it had all these really awesome elements combined into one. And if I was to rate the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong comic tie-in, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was a really fun time, and I cannot recommend it enough to people looking for a fun time in a comic book format. It is awesome for Godzilla fans and superhero fans, and it was just a really fun way to celebrate these two different IPs together. I don't know. I really liked it. Oh, also, I know I got a ton of comments on my original YouTube short reviewing this series about how Superman would absolutely die from the atomic breath, and I just don't agree. I don't agree that the MonsterVerse Godzilla's base atomic breath is strong enough to kill Superman. Superman can survive nuclear bombs. I know Superman technically doesn't die, but he's like out of commission for most of the comic. I know you had to do that so that you got your ace out of here so that he couldn't clean up the whole mess before it even got messy, but I don't think the MonsterVerse Godzilla's atomic breath was that strong before the New Empire. I think after New Empire, sure, probably. But if Kong could tank the atomic breath and walk away with only a burn on his back, and Scar King could walk off the super mega atomic breath, I think Superman would be okay. But I know crossover's got a crossover, and I'm okay with that. You guys were the ones yelling at me, but I was totally chill with it. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. If you want to support the channel, you can use the link in the description below, where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man out.